Some people walk into a bar and order a drink. Others walk in and take something far more dangerous. That October night in Portland, when I first saw the couple at the end of my bar, I thought they were just another pair of night owls looking for craft cocktails and conversation. But when the woman touched my hand to return her credit card, I felt something drain out of me. Not blood, not energy. Something deeper. And when I looked into her eyes, I saw decades of hunger staring back at me. My name's Jason Fox, and I've been pouring drinks in bars across America for over 2 decades. I've heard thousands of stories, but there are some that you just can't forget. This is one of those. The copper door sat tucked between a vintage bookshop and a closed tattoo parlor in Portland's Pearl District. I'd been working there for 3 months, and the clientele ran the usual spectrum. Tech workers decompressing after 14-hour days, artists nursing cheap whiskey, couples on awkward first dates, normal people living normal lives. Then Marcus and Elise walked in, and normal walked right back out the door. They arrived separately. That's the first thing that struck me as odd. Marcus came in around 9 on a Friday, took the corner stool, and ordered a gin martini. Extra dry, 3 olives. He had this way of sitting perfectly still like a mannequin someone had positioned just right. Mid-30s maybe. Dark hair swept back, wearing a gray suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. His hands never fidgeted, never checked his phone. Just sat there with this small smile, watching people. Elise showed up 20 minutes later. She wore a red coat that caught every eye in the place, but her face held this careful blankness, like someone had smoothed away all expression. She sat 4 stools down from Marcus, didn't look at him, ordered a glass of Pinot Noir and pulled out a worn paperback. For the next hour, they existed in the same space without acknowledging each other's presence. Here's where it got strange. Every person who sat between them left within minutes. A college kid lasted maybe 5 minutes before suddenly remembering somewhere else he needed to be. A businesswoman made it 3. An older gentleman sat down, opened his mouth to order, then closed it and walked out without a word. By 10:30, those 5 stools formed an empty island in an otherwise crowded bar. I'm not the superstitious type. 20 years slinging drinks cures you of fairy tales pretty quick. But something about the empty space between them made my skin prickle. It felt deliberate, territorial, like watching 2 predators mark boundaries. Around 11, a regular named Tommy Wu started chatting up Elise. Tommy was harmless. Friendly guy, software engineer, always overtipped. He'd had maybe 2 beers, wasn't even close to drunk. I watched him lean in, say something that made Elise smile. She touched his forearm. Just a light touch, her fingers barely grazing his sleeve. Tommy's face went slack, his eyes unfocused. He stood up slowly, dropped a 20 on the bar for a $12 tab, and walked toward the exit. I called after him. He didn't turn around, didn't even flinch, just kept walking with this empty expression, like someone had reached inside his head and scooped out everything that made him Tommy. Marcus finally looked at Elise then. Not angry, not jealous, just this small nod, like she'd passed some kind of test. That's when they finally sat together, moving to the 2 stools at the far end of my bar, away from the other customers, away from the noise. They started coming in every Friday, always separate arrivals, always that strange empty zone between them, always someone leaving dazed after even brief contact. I started paying attention, taking notes on my phone during bathroom breaks, documenting the pattern. The touches were the key. Brief, casual, a hand on a shoulder, fingers brushing against someone's wrist. Never more than a second or 2, but afterward, the person would change. Sometimes subtle. A woman who'd been laughing with friends suddenly went quiet, lost in thought. A man animated about a basketball game just stopped talking mid-sentence. Others more dramatic, like Tommy, walking out like their batteries had died. 3 weeks in, I worked up the nerve to ask Marcus about it. Slow night, just a handful of customers scattered around the room. He was nursing his second martini. I topped off his water glass and mentioned, as casually as I could manage, that he and his wife were interesting customers. He corrected me, told me she was his girlfriend, but there was this amused edge to his voice, like I'd said something funny. I pressed a bit, told him they had an unusual routine. He agreed they did, then asked if it bothered me. Thing is, I hadn't told him my name. Sure, it was on my name tag, but something about the way he said Jason felt too familiar, too knowing. I asked him if it should bother me, and he said that depended on how much I noticed and how much I was willing to ignore. Then he told me I seemed like someone who noticed things. Before I could respond, Elise appeared at his shoulder. I hadn't seen her walk over. One moment she was at the other end of the bar, the next she was there, close enough that I could smell her perfume, something floral and dark. She told Marcus I was curious. He agreed, said I was very curious. Then Elise turned to me and said curiosity was dangerous, especially about things that didn't concern me. But her eyes told a different story. There was this hunger in them, this interest, like she wanted me to keep being curious, like my questions fed something in her. I backed off that night, served them their drinks, kept my distance, ignored the usual weirdness. But I couldn't stop thinking about it, about Tommy's blank face, about the way people left that empty space between them, about how neither of them ever seemed to actually eat or drink much. Marcus would order martinis, but the glasses always sat mostly full. Elise's wine barely went down. 4 weeks became 6. 6 became 8. I researched online during my breaks, searched for patterns. People acting strange after being touched. Couples who drain others. I found a lot of nonsense. Conspiracy theories. Bad fiction. Nothing that fit what I was witnessing. Then came the night of November 23rd. I remember because it was the Friday before Thanksgiving, and the bar was packed with people getting a head start on holiday drinking. Marcus and Elise arrived within minutes of each other, breaking their usual pattern. They sat together from the start, and they looked hungry. I don't mean hungry like skipping lunch, I mean hungry like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Elise's hands trembled slightly as she gripped her wine glass. Marcus's jaw was tight, his eyes tracking every person who walked past. A bachelorette party took over the center of the bar. 8 women, all wearing matching pink shirts, all laughing too loud. The bride-to-be was a blonde girl named Sarah, maybe 25, radiating happiness. She kept hugging her friends, showing off her ring, talking about the wedding next spring. Elise watched her like a cat watching a bird. Around midnight, Sarah stumbled toward the bathroom, had to pass right by Marcus and Elise's stools. Elise stood up, moved into Sarah's path. They collided gently, and Elise caught Sarah's elbow to steady her. Sarah apologized, laughing, saying she'd had too much champagne. Elise told her no harm was done, but her hand lingered on Sarah's arm. 3 seconds, maybe 4. When Elise let go, Sarah's smile faded, just melted off her face like wax. She swayed, and her eyes welled up with tears. Then she said something that made everyone around her freeze. She said she didn't know why she was getting married, that she didn't love him, that she didn't think she loved anyone. Her voice had gone completely flat, hollow. Her friends rushed over, started asking what was wrong, what happened. Sarah just shook her head and left, walked right out of her own bachelorette party. 2 of her friends followed, their faces concerned. The celebration dissolved within minutes. Elise sat back down next to Marcus. She was breathing harder. Her cheeks had color now. Her hands steady. Marcus touched her shoulder, and they both turned to look at me with these identical expressions. Satisfied. Full. That's when I understood. Not everything, but enough. Whatever they were taking from people, it wasn't blood. It was something else. Something emotional. Something that left people hollow. I cornered Elise by the bathroom an hour later. The crowd had thinned. Marcus was outside taking a call. I had maybe 2 minutes. I asked her bluntly what she was. She asked if I was concerned. I told her, yeah, I was concerned about my customers, about Sarah, that she'd done something to that girl. Elise told me she'd given Sarah clarity, that the girl had been living a lie, planning to marry someone she didn't love because it's what people expected. That now Sarah knew the truth. I said she'd taken something from her. Then Elise stepped closer and explained it. Said she'd taken Sarah's illusions, her false hope, her shallow happiness. She asked if I knew what it was like to survive on emotions, to need them the way I needed water. She said real, genuine feeling was rare, that most people faked it. But when you found someone genuinely happy, genuinely in love, genuinely anything, it was intoxicating. I said the word that had been building in my head, told her they were vampires. The word felt ridiculous leaving my mouth, but it was the only word that fit. Elise actually laughed. She said no, vampires drank blood, that they were something else, something older, something that had been feeding on human emotion since humans first felt anything worth feeding on. I asked why Portland? Why my bar? She told me Portland had lots of feelings, artists, idealists, people who felt things deeply, and that my bar was comfortable. Good drinks, good location. She said I was an excellent bartender and that they appreciated that. She walked away then, leaving me standing by the bathroom door feeling like I'd just had a conversation that rewrote my understanding of reality. But here's the thing about knowing monsters exist. You can't unknow it. Can't pretend everything's normal. I started watching them more carefully. Started noticing things I'd missed. The way they never cast quite the right shadows under the bar lights. The way reflections in bottles and glasses showed them slightly out of sync with their actual positions. The way dogs outside would start barking when they walked past, even through closed windows. And I noticed they had rules. They never took from the same person twice in one night. Never took from someone who was already sad or depressed. Only from people experiencing positive emotions, joy, love, hope, excitement. They were harvesting the good stuff and leaving the empty space behind. December rolled in cold and wet. The bar filled with holiday parties. Office workers celebrating year-end, families meeting for drinks before dinner. The city sparkled with all that manufactured cheer, and Marcus and Elise fed every Friday like clockwork. I started warning people. Subtle warnings, telling customers that couple at the end was trouble, they should keep their distance. Most ignored me, but a few listened. A few stayed away. Those nights Marcus and Elise would leave early, looking irritated and unsatisfied. The third Friday in December, Marcus waited until the bar emptied. 3 a.m, just me closing up. Elise stood by the door, making sure we were alone. Marcus told me I'd been interfering. His voice was pleasant, conversational, but his eyes were cold. I said I was just looking out for my customers. He called it noble, but foolish. Then he stood up, walked around the bar to my side. I tensed, ready to grab the baseball bat I kept under the register. He held up his hands, told me to relax. Said they weren't going to hurt me. That I'd been a good host, but that I needed to understand something. I asked what that was. He said they didn't take anything people needed. That joy was renewable. Love replenished itself. That they sipped, they didn't drain. He brought up Sarah, said she'd be fine. A little numb for a while, but she'd recover. And that she wouldn't marry someone she didn't love. That they'd done her a favor. I asked if stealing her happiness was a favor. Marcus leaned against the bar and said they'd stolen her delusion. Then he gave me what he called the truth. Said they'd been doing this for 200 years. 200 years of taking small amounts from thousands of people. And that most people didn't even miss it. They'd go home thinking they had an off night. That they'd had too much to drink. That they were just tired. Then they'd wake up and life would go on. He said they weren't destroying lives, just surviving. I pointed out they were surviving on other people's emotions. Marcus said yes, the same way I survived on food grown by farmers I'd never meet. Meat from animals I'd never see. That everyone's survival depended on taking from someone else. That they were just more honest about it. Elise walked over, stood next to Marcus. She said they liked this bar, that they'd like to keep coming, but that they needed me to stop interfering, to let them feed, let them be, and in return, they'd be careful, discreet, make sure no one got hurt. I asked what happened if I refused. They looked at each other. Some unspoken communication passed between them. Then Marcus turned back and said they'd leave, find another bar, another city, another place to feed, but that the next ones like them who moved in after they were gone might not be as careful, might not have rules, might take everything and leave people broken. He paused, then said at least with them, I knew what was happening, that I could watch, could intervene if things went too far. He asked if that wasn't better than the unknown. He had a point, a twisted, uncomfortable point, but a point nonetheless. Better the devil you know than the one you don't. I agreed. What else could I do? Call the police? Tell them 2 people were feeding on emotions at my bar? I'd sound insane. Throw them out? They'd just go somewhere else, somewhere without anyone paying attention. So I became complicit. The watchful bartender. The one who noticed when they went too far and would accidentally interrupt. Drop a glass. Start a conversation. Create a distraction that broke their contact. Most nights I didn't need to. Most nights they kept their word. Small touches. Brief feeding. People left a little dimmer but not destroyed. But January brought a change. Marcus and Elise started arguing. Not loud. They were too controlled for that. But I could see the tension. The way they sat further apart. The way Elise would touch people more aggressively, leaving them more drained. The way Marcus would watch her with something like concern. Second Friday in January, Elise came in alone. First time in 4 months. She sat at her usual stool and ordered wine. She looked wrong. Her hands shook. Her eyes were too bright. When I set down her glass, she grabbed my wrist. I felt it immediately. That draining sensation. Like someone had opened a valve in my chest and was letting something vital leak out. My happiness about a date I had planned tomorrow. My satisfaction at a good night's tips. My contentment with a job well done. All of it started flowing out of me and into her. I yanked my hand back, stumbled backward into the shelf of bottles behind me. One fell, shattered. The noise brought people's attention our way. Elise apologized, but it wasn't sincere. Her smile was wild, desperate. She said she was so hungry, that Marcus had left 2 days ago, just left, and that she was starving. I asked where he'd gone. She said she didn't know, that they'd had a fight about me actually, that Marcus said they were taking too much, that she was taking too much, that they needed to move on before someone got hurt, before I called someone, before they got exposed. I asked if they had been taking too much. She didn't answer, just stared at her wine glass, and I realized something. She looked different, younger. Her skin had this glow. The laugh lines around her eyes had smoothed out. She'd been feeding more than I'd noticed, getting stronger while leaving her victims weaker. Then she said something that chilled me. Said she couldn't stop. That's what Marcus couldn't understand. That it wasn't about survival anymore. It was about the feeling, the rush. That taking someone's joy felt better than anything else. Better than anything she'd felt in 2 centuries. And that the more she took, the more she needed. She was an addict. That's what I was looking at. An emotional vampire who'd become addicted to her own food source. 3 guys in Seahawks jerseys came in loud and happy. Some game had gone well. They were riding high on victory and beer. Elise's head turned toward them like a sunflower tracking light. She stood up. I moved fast, came around the bar, stepped between her and the happy fans. Told her not tonight. She told me to move. I refused. Said she was out of control, that she needed to leave. She said she needed to feed. Her eyes had gone strange, the pupils too large, swallowing the gray. Then she gave me a choice. Let her have them, or she'd take from me instead. And this time she wouldn't stop with happiness. She'd take everything. Hope, love, will. She'd leave me an empty shell who couldn't remember why living mattered. Behind me, the Seahawks fans ordered a round of shots, completely unaware. I could let Elise have them, let her drain some of their victory joy. They'd go home confused about why they stopped caring about the game. Wake up tomorrow wondering why it all felt meaningless. Maybe they'd recover. Maybe they wouldn't. Or I could refuse. Become her victim. Let her drain me to save strangers who'd never know what I'd sacrificed. I chose option 3, pulled out my phone and called Marcus. His number was in my contacts from a drunk customer I'd reunited with a lost phone. Marcus had left it at the bar back in November. He answered on the second ring. I told him Elise was at the bar, out of control, threatening customers. He said he'd be right there. He arrived in 15 minutes, came through the door looking tired and sad. He said her name, just her name. She turned, saw him, and something broke in her expression. The predatory hunger cracked, and underneath was just pain. She said he'd left her. Marcus told her she'd been killing people, not taking their emotions, taking their will to live. He brought up a man in Seattle last month who'd stepped in front of a bus 3 days after she touched him. and a woman in Tacoma who ended up institutionalized, catatonic. He said she wasn't feeding anymore. She was destroying. Elise's voice cracked when she said she couldn't help it, that she needed more, that the small touches had stopped being enough, that she needed everything they had. Marcus looked at me, thanked me for calling, said he'd take her somewhere, get her help. I asked if there was help for emotional vampires. He said there were ways. People like them who'd learned control, facilities, communities, that she needed to detox, learn to feed without destroying, or stop feeding entirely. Then he turned back to Elise and told her to come on, that they were leaving. She resisted at first, but whatever had been between them for however long they'd been together won out. She took his hand. They walked toward the door. At the threshold, Marcus turned back, said they wouldn't return to Portland, to this bar, that I was free of them. But he gave me some advice, said if others like them found this place, and they would eventually, I shouldn't try to be a hero. Just watch, interfere when I must, and remember that monsters were complicated, that some of them were trying not to be monstrous. They left. I haven't seen them since. Checked missing persons reports for weeks afterward. Nothing in Seattle or Tacoma matched what Marcus described. Maybe he lied. Maybe he downplayed how bad it was. Or maybe it was true, and those people just disappeared into the cracks where nobody notices. The Copper Door still gets its share of unusual customers. Last month, a man came in who could make people forget him the moment he left their line of sight. The week before, a woman whose laughter made everyone around her tell the truth. Portland attracts the strange, the supernatural, the things that shouldn't exist but do anyway. I still tend bar, still watch, still intervene when I can. But I think about Marcus and Elise a lot, about how something could survive for 2 centuries on stolen feelings, about whether Elise ever learned control, or whether Marcus had to make a harder choice, about how many others like them are out there, sitting in bars just like mine, feeding on the emotions we broadcast without realizing they're being harvested. Do you ever leave somewhere and feel emptier than when you arrived? Not physically, emotionally. Like something got left behind that you can't quite name. Maybe it was just a bad night. Maybe you had too much to drink. Or maybe someone like Elise touched your hand, smiled at you, took a little piece of what makes life worth living. Have you ever felt an inexplicable emptiness after a night out? Experienced something that defies all logic? Share your story in the comments. I read everyone, and who knows, maybe your story will be the next one I share here. If you want to keep hearing stories like this, real stories that have been told to me over these 20 years behind the bar, subscribe to the channel. See you in the next story if you dare.